when the Home Office issues a sponsor licence to an organisation, it makes it very clear that it places significant trust in that organisation to comply with the various duties and obligations that come with being a sponsor licence holder. And the guidance on sponsorship issued to sponsors makes it very clear that sponsorship is a privilege and not a right, and that those organisations that benefit most from employing sponsored workers must then also play their part in ensuring compliance with the sponsorship duties. So Ruth, what are the duties that come with being a sponsor licence holder?
Well, one of the key duties is reporting. So the Home Office expects sponsors to update them if there are changes to the organisation or to the sponsored workers. All of these reports are made through the sponsor management system, and generally reports that are made in relation to sponsored workers need to be made within 10 working days, and reports about the organisation itself are generally required within 20 working days. So, for example, when we're looking at reports needed in relation to sponsored workers, the sponsor may need to update the Home Office if the sponsored worker has been absent from work without approval for 10 consecutive days. Or, for example, if they don't turn up to work within 28 days of their start date that's listed on their COS. Again, if the sponsored worker's role changes, then a report needs to be made. If their job title changes or there are some changes to their key duties. Or, for example, if the sponsored worker's sponsorship actually finishes early for some reason, this needs to be reported through the SMS. Looking at the types of reports needed about the organisation, there are a number of reports. So, for example, if the organisation changes its registered or operating address, that has to be updated. Or if there are significant changes to the organisation structure, so if there's a merger or an acquisition that impacts the sponsor licence holder, these type of things need to be updated with the Home Office.
And you mentioned having to report changes to the migrants' circumstances or job details, etc. Presumably then the Home Office is expecting that there's some significant monitoring of migrant workers going on.
Yes, so an employer does have the duty to monitor its sponsored workers, so looking at things like any absences from work, and also ensuring that the job that they're doing actually matches that's on their certificate of sponsorship.
And what about record keeping then? What kind of records does the Home Office expect you to have regarding sponsored workers?
So you're correct, there are a number of record keeping duties. This starts with the sponsor licence application documents themselves. So you need to keep all of the documents that were submitted with that application, as well as a copy of the application form. And then specific record keeping duties in relation to sponsored workers. There are a range of things here, and we always advise that you have, a file, be that a hard copy or an electronic copy for each of your sponsored workers, to make sure that these types of things are easily accessible should the Home Office need to see them. But it's things like showing that you've done a compliant right to work check on the sponsored workers, making sure you have a record of their national insurance number, making sure you have a record of their current address and contact details, and making sure that that's kept up to date. You'll need things like their employment contract and pay slips. There is a whole list of documents that you do have to keep, and for the whole list you can find that in Appendix D to the sponsor guidance.
And how does the Home Office actually check that an organisation is complying with all of these duties?
So the Home Office can do a compliance visit, and that can be either whilst you're applying for the licence, or at any point during the lifetime of holding that licence. These visits can be unannounced or announced. More commonly now, what we're seeing is that most audits, compliance audits, are run online, so remotely. During these compliance audits, what they can do is speak to the key personnel on the licence. They can also look at these records, so the documents that we've just discussed, making sure that you have all of those on your files. And also talking to sponsored workers, seeing what type of work they're doing and making sure that that matches up with the duties on their certificate of sponsorship.
And what would the Home Office do then? What action would they take if they weren't happy about compliance with sponsor duties?
So initially, it's likely that the sponsor licence would be suspended, and during that period you can actually appeal against any suspension. If that appeal isn't accepted, then the sponsor licence can then be revoked by the Home Office. What that then means is that you're no longer able to sponsor workers that are already with you, and also you can't sponsor any future workers. There's also usually a cooling off period from which the licence has been revoked before you can actually apply for a licence again in order to sponsor workers again in the future. If you'd like any further information on the points that we've discussed, please feel free to contact myself or Shabana on the contact details that you can see on your screen, or you can find our details on the Walker Morris website.